up in the way when I tried to.
I'm hoping that some of you already at least know about the Wayback Machine, but there's some other things to say about the Internet Archive as well. You'll see near the bottom of the screen, there's a URL there, archive.org. And that's the only URL you need for all this stuff, because everything comes from this one central website. There are many subsidiary websites, but they're all accessible from there. Okay, so next. Okay, this is the website for the Internet Archive. And you'll see right in the middle, there's a link for the Wayback Machine. And I'm going to talk about that probably first. I want you to notice the little icons. There's some icons right near the top, and there's some that are near the bottom of the screen, but they're basically the same ones. This is just a screenshot, but if it was live, when you would hover over them, it would say things like books, videos, that sort of thing. And the blue one on the right there is collections. Okay, so we're going to see more about that later. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Internet Archive is, and then I'm going to talk about the Wayback Machine and some of the other things. Okay, so this is the Internet Archive's About page, and it's got a lot of information on it, but you can see at the top that I have logged in. There, my name is up there. Most of the things here you don't need to log in, but there's a few things that you do. For instance, if you wanted to contribute to the Internet Archive, then you would need to log in. And also, one of the things they have on there is a book borrowing service, and you need to log in so they can get your books back. Okay, so
is it free?
All this stuff is free, as far as I know. I have never see anything, except they do have, notice this donate button here. Okay, so it's free, but you are welcome to pay. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to go on to the next screen, because some of this text is small and I made some of it big here. All right, so here's the Internet Archive's headquarters in San Francisco, California. And the Internet Archive, as you say, it's a nonprofit organization. And so they want to preserve all knowledge, just like Wikipedia wants to preserve all knowledge. Nobody can preserve all knowledge, but they're doing their best. Okay, so they have started to save things, and they've saved, as you can see, so far 625 billion web pages, 38 million books, and you can see all. And one thing that I liked was the 240,000 live concerts. If you like the Grateful Dead, there's lots of many live concerts. And 7 million videos, 2 million television news programs, 4 million images, and 796,000 software programs. Software programs is, they're software and they're programs, right? So don't really need to say both, but okay. All right, so here is Brewster Kahle, and he's the fellow that thought up the whole idea. And he and a couple of his people he worked with were starting a company called Alexa Internet. And you've probably heard of Alexa because they're the company that does all the rankings of websites. You can look at Alexa and you can find out how well known various websites are. So Alexa is a profit-making company because companies subscribe to it so they can see how their web pages are doing. Okay, but in order to do that, they had to collect a lot of information. So Brewster and a couple of other people, I think one of them was one of his students, they decided that instead of just keeping all that information for their website rankings. And of course it became out of date and they could have just dumped it, but they decided instead to start archiving it. And so they have, you know, those web crawling robots that are going around finding out all this information. And they just adjusted them within a few months. They adjusted them so that they would crawl through a number of levels of all the websites. Not if you've got a website that's got 40 or so levels on it, they don't go down that far. But the first few levels of every website, and they were archiving the HTML and also the images and keeping them. So this was starting to have a pretty good big database, but at that point it was still sort of private. They didn't know what they're going to do with it yet. They're just saving it on spec. So then they got the idea that there were other things they could save besides websites. So in 1999, they started also preserving digitizing and preserving other sorts of things. And the first one that they did was the Prelinger Archives of Films related to American culture. So these aren't films like Gone with the Wind and stuff like that. They're a lot of them are like home movies or videos that were taken by people at events, you know, and so people would donate them to the Prelinger Archive, and they needed a place to store these things. And so Brewster and his co-workers, they made a nonprofit, the Internet Archive, and started just collecting all kinds of things. So then in 2001, they launched the Wayback Machine, and they took all that data about websites and made it available to the general public. So they had quite a big database by then, because they'd been doing it since 1996. But until 2001, nobody but them could see it. Oops. Oh, that's not right. There we go. Okay, so the Wayback Machine. And so as I was saying, it saves mainly websites in HTML or, you know, other similar formats to HTML, more modern ones, and the images that are linked in there. But the web crawlers, they don't crawl down to the bottom. They don't crawl through sites that are prohibited by robot.txt, and they can't get information that's in a database. And sometimes they can't get dynamic content. It depends on how it's organized. Although I did see that they seem to be able to get some WordPress information. So one of the things that's good about this is that the links that they have provide a permanent web content. So if you're an author and you want to write an article and you need to cite a web page, the problem with that is you come back next week and that web page could be changed, and the thing you cited is not there anymore. But if it's in the Wayback Machine, it's organized by date, and if they captured it, then it's not going to change. The web page might change, but Wayback Machine will show you what it looked like on that date. And because of that, they can provide evidence in legal cases. Okay, and there was kind of an interesting story about a company that was being sued, and so they went and they put one of those robot.txt things, even though they hadn't had one before. They changed the robots.txt to prohibit the crawling, and the Wayback Machine, they didn't delete the content, but they removed it from view. But the people that were suing them got what do they call that now? Not an injunction, the opposite. Anyway, they went to a judge and they made them open it up again. So because they said you can't do that retroactively. Okay, so this is what the Wayback Machine looked like when you go there. For quite a few years, you would have to put in the exact URL of the page you wanted to see. There was no search engine then, but now they've managed to get a search engine, and I don't think it's completely effective, but in this case, it found the website I was looking for. It was similar enough, I guess. So one of the things that I often like to do is look up things about music magazines. So there was a music magazine that's no longer in existence called Chart Attack that wrote reviews of music that was on the hit parade. And so I put in Chart Attack, and here you can see there's the Chart Attack URL. And so I'll go to the next slide. And this is what it looks like if it finds a website. You can see that the first time they crawled through that website was in 1998. And each of these black bars shows that they have done a crawl through that website. And because it's a magazine that's changing all the time, they crawl through it quite often. But one of the things about the web crawlers in the Wayback Machine, they're whatever their algorithm is, it's not very consistent. So apparently, for instance, it took them 4 years to find CNN. You would think, you wouldn't think that would be what? Anyway, so so sometimes they'll crawl a lot and then they'll go somewhere else and forget to come back. So you can't really depend on it, except that people can. Oh, sorry, people can go and ask them to record a specific website on a specific day, and then it will. Okay, so now down at the bottom, you can see in February, it crawled through there twice in 1999. So I just picked the first one. And here's what the Chart Attack online magazine looked like in 1999. And you notice that a couple of the images over here on the left, the little web crawlers missed them. So that can happen too. And here's what the same website looked like in 2017. Now, I did look for a 2022 one, but the magazine isn't around anymore. And instead, someone took advantage of the fact that this was a popular URL, and they put up what looks like a magazine, but it's totally all advertising. So I decided not to show you that because you've probably seen enough advertising. Okay, so now then I decided to look at my own website. Here's what it looked like in 2008, including this embarrassing grammatical error here on the family reunion ad. Anyway, so, and then this is what it looks like in 2022. So you can see all the different versions in between. And if you look at the top, you can see that it's only crawled through my site occasionally. It doesn't change very often. And also it doesn't get nearly as many hits as more famous websites. So now here's what the Durham PC Users Club website looked like in the year 2000. This looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? So
maybe the site needs a facelift.
well, this looks fine. It's doing its job. I think it looks a little like crooked. I think maybe the fonts on the computers have changed. It probably was a little more symmetrical at the time than it's looking here. So okay, so now another thing that you can see when you go there is it makes a site map. So this is the site map, and the green part around here, around the second level, that's all the speaker descriptions. And the little pink thing here are the Rife reports, you know, and then the newsletters and all kinds of things. So if you were to click on one of those, if this were live, but it isn't, but if it were, it would take you right to that page. So this is a really handy thing if you wanted to explore a website. You can go along and just click in various places and you can see everything, the whole, every page on the whole website just from clicking on here. Also, they gather some statistics. You can see that the Durham PC Users Club website, it's had about 3,000 URLs on it, and nearly 400 images, you know, various things. So if you like to gather that kind of information. Here's what the chart attack chart looks like. And all these multicolored ones around the edge, each one is a different issue of the magazine. And you can see they start out tiny and then they're gradually getting bigger as time goes on. So, kind of. Okay, so now, after a while, the Internet Archive decided to branch out, and they started all kinds of new projects. You might wonder how they're getting any money to do this, but a lot of it's from donations. But they also, some of these projects, they do them for people and they do get paid for it, but it's nonprofit, because any money that they make, they put back into other digitizing and servers and things like that. So here are some of the projects that they have going. They have an archive of political TV ads. Some of those would be very interesting. The Building Libraries Together one is about helping libraries digitize their collections. And then there's the Open Library. This is the one where you can actually borrow some books and things. Scanning services, if people need help with scanning, of course, they can only do a certain amount of that, because you never run out of things that need scanning. They have a big software archive, which I might show you some later, and of course the Wayback Machine. Now, Archive It is it's an online sort of software thing that helps people who want to archive things, and so it'll help you organize your archive, help you keep your files, but you know, not your files on your computer, but scan things that you want to archive for the future. They also are organizing an offline archive for places where people don't have internet. So they will take a section of their internet archive, maybe a certain topic, and they will sort of package it up and put it somewhere in the world where the people could come and access it if they don't have the internet. The book server is sort of, I guess it's a little bit like, I can't remember the name of that other website where I borrow all kinds of books, but at any rate, it's for borrowing and downloading books. The Open Content Alliance is an organization that promotes information being public, and we have a similar one here in Canada. Open Data Project, I think it's called. We had a speaker about that a couple of years ago at our club, and that was quite interesting. Anyway, they support this organization. Okay, they educate people about archiving. They have a bookmobile that travels around. I didn't look into that one. I think bookmobiles aren't that exciting. So the Open Community Networks is more about sort of like the Open Content Alliance. It's another one. But the Petabox is interesting. I'm going to say something about that later. And the 301 Works, what they do is keep track of those tiny URLs. You know, when people use the shortened URLs, they have a big database of these shortened URLs so they don't get lost, and people will always know what the actual URLs were. So, okay, so here's the Petabox storage system. They were archiving so much stuff, they decided to they decided to design their own storage systems. And on the right, you can see these racks of hard drives here. Okay, and the cabinets that they've built, and they've organized them so that they are low power, and they used low-end PCs to do it with, and automatic mirroring. And on the right, you can see that they've designed them, the racks, so they'll fit in shipping crates. So quite a few places you might see something like this sitting outside a large library or at a university, and it's plugged in to the power. And if it's in a cold climate, they even put in vents so the heat from it helps heat your building. Okay, so okay. So here's the open library, which I was interested in because I just love to read. So I looked into this one a little bit more. And so I put in the search engine, I put Robert Heinlein, my favorite author, and up came all kinds of his books. But you know, he hasn't been dead for long enough yet, so his books are not off copyright. So I could read this book and I could borrow it by the hour, but I couldn't copy it. Okay, so it depends on the copyright status of the books, whether you can just download it or you have to look at it on there. So, and I'm presuming the reason they can do that is because they actually have copies of those books somewhere. Okay. And this is the Archive It project, which it's a web archiving service that you can subscribe to. And I think it probably does have fees that you can use to archive your own collection, and they'll help you do it. Now, here's an example of something that was done that way. This is the Toronto Reference Library collection of the digital Toronto city directories. And I don't know if you look on the left side, you'll see those are PDFs, and they are, those ones are on the public library website because the old ones are small. But as they started to get very big, I guess they just didn't have enough space for those. So they donated their PDFs to the Internet Archive. And that has two good effects. First of all, now they've got a backup copy of these giant PDFs. And secondly, the traffic in them doesn't go through their server. The Internet Archive serves it out. And they have, of course, much like faster servers for these big files. And the Toronto taxpayers save a little money. And here's what the city directory one of them looks like. Since all my relatives for a number of generations were from Toronto, I use these books a lot for looking up interesting little facts about them. Okay. All right, so now archive.org, there it has a lot of collections. And here are some of the collections that they have. I mentioned collections at the very beginning. I said I would talk about them later. So they have, if you see the little slider on the right, you can see that this is just a very tiny little bit of the list of collections. So I just took a random screenshot here. And they have just many collections of documents and other things. And I was interested in this one on the top right, which says Live Music Archive. So here it is. And so this is the collection of 242,000 live concerts. And they have a moving image archive, which has got all kinds of films and television and videos, all kinds of things. Great. Here's an example of some of the ones that were in there. I think I saw that movie, The Ten Commandments, anyway. So, but there are many, many of them. Now, you might be interested in the Internet Archive software collection, and they have 800,000 pieces of software. Now, these are software that they could legally give out. Okay, so they're not, there's not every piece of software in the world, but they do have a lot of software that you might find interesting. So Dan asked me if I could find a specific piece of software in there. Which one was it, Dan? Oh, Zorin. Okay, so I went around looking. Well, you can see here, there's a collection of operating systems and kids software, CD-ROMs, original shareware CD-ROMs, and they've got ones that were from magazines, all kinds of things. So here's the page where I looked up Zorin, and I don't know how James Bond got in there. I think that's a misfile, but you can see there's lots of Linux stuff, and there's some GitHub things. And anyway. Okay, so those are some of the things you can find at the Internet Archive. And there are a lot more, but you can browse through it yourself and look at all the different collections they have just by going to archive.org. And that's, I guess, what I have to show. So I'll stop sharing.